We are now doing part C of the suggested solution of SAICA First Board Exam, Paper 2. Part C is on part 1. So we're going to do the same thing. What we'll do, we will start by reading at the required. Then we'll go back to the scenario to remind ourselves what was in the scenario. Then we'll go back and look at the suggested solution. Let us see what part C required is asking us to do. The examiner is saying write a memorandum to the board of directors in which you critically review its decision to vote against a right issue as a means of reducing the company debt. Include calculation and key ratios. Our calculation will be worth 10 marks, while the discussion will be 16 marks. So as you look at the information that is presented to us, there is a mistake that you might potentially do when you answer this question. So now the issue would be, or the error that you will make is that you only calculate the ratio and not critical review. The other problem is that you might critical review without providing the calculations and the ratios. What else could happen is that you do not use the memorandum. So in this required, there are 3 things that you need to understand the examiner needs from you. Number 1, they want the calculations. Number 2, they want the key ratios. And number 3, they want you to critical review in the form of the memorandum. So the structure of your solution should be in the memorandum. That way you're going to be reviewing the solution. You're going to be reviewing the decision of the board voting against the right issue. So you know that the reason they need the money is because they want to reduce the debt. So as they say key ratios, in your mind, you're like, okay, some of the ratios that I need are ratios that are linked to the company liquidity and gearing. So by now, you know, Guti, these are the ratios that you will need to calculate. Another thing, you know the vote is against the right issue. What is the right issue? It's when the company wants to increase the number of shares that is out in the public or the outstanding shares. Now, what you know is that because now we are talking about the shares, then the calculation I will need to do with reference to shares, it will be me looking at the movement of the shares, how liquid the share has been over the years. One other thing that you're going to be asking yourself is about market cap. You want to know what's the value of the market cap over the years. Why? You want to know that because you know the calculation should be linked to matters that has to do with shares and the shares outstanding. So now that you are done with analyzing what is required of us, I wanted to go back to the scenario and summarize what was in the scenario. Then we'll be coming back to the suggested solution and look at it together. So this question is with reference to part 3 of the scenario. It was talking about debt refinancing. So what is happening? The board was considering the refinancing of the existing loans. The total value of the existing loan that are due by 30 September 2025 is worth 4.3 billion. So by now that we know that they need 4.3 billion by 30 September 2025. Why do they need to do to refinance? It's because they don't have sufficient cash to repay the loan. And we know those loans were taken out years ago. During the time when they took out those loans, the company was less geared. So if it's less geared, chances of getting lower interest rate was high at that point. If we look at 10.75 on a variable rate, that is prime minus 2.5. If we're looking at prime today. So we don't know exactly what was the prime years ago. But if we're looking in today's term, this looks like prime minus 2.5, 0.2.5%, which is not bad. One of the directors at the board meeting suggested that French courts consider settling portion of the loan using the right issues. That will raise additional equity finance. And then they stated that if they go forward with the right issue, there will be one share for every 4 shares outstanding. And then the right issue price will be 17.20. So it will be 17 rand 20 cents. So French Card has already breached one of its covenants when the company total liability exceeded its total asset by more than 75%. Another debt covenant should its interest-bearing debt rise beyond 90% of total asset. So they're already in breach of the debt covenants. So what is debt covenants? It's basically when you go borrow money, especially when companies they go borrow money from the bank will give them certain ratio that they need to stay below. So they will tell them that your total liability should not exceed this percentage of asset. So they're saying here, they're saying they had breached that. And there is other covenant that they're about to breach. If it happened that the interest-bearing debt rises beyond 90% of the total asset. So the directors ultimately voted against the right issue for 2 reasons. So now we see that they want to go for right issues, but however the board is voting against, or the directors are voting against the right issue. And they gave 2 reasons why they don't want to go ahead with right issue. Number one, they said they have concern with the share price, that it will go down even further. And if they go with the right issue, it will dilute the shareholders' value. It will have dilutive effect on the shareholders' value. And then what they're saying is that the share price historical has been 30, 20 to 36. So that is their target. So basically this is more like to say this is what they want to be. So if the shares goes below this, then it will be outside the target range. So the right issue, we know for sure it will affect the share price. And when it does affect the share price, then the company share price will then be below the target. So for that reason, they're saying they don't want to go ahead and do the right issue because they know it will affect the share price. The share price will go below the target. And moreover, they consider that the value of the shareholders will be diluted, will be diluted. They then gave us the information for the share tracker of the company. So this is the number of shares in issue. So if you can see, the share price, the number of shares in issue have not changed from 2020 until 2023. So basically, they have not issued any additional shares or done any right issue from 2020 up until 2023. And then the number of shares they have outstanding, it's 1 billion. Then if you're looking at the closing share price, it's continuously declining from 2036 in 2020. And if you're looking at 2023, it's sitting at 24. Then they're giving the second reason. So the second reason they're saying, in 2018, they did a right issue and their target was 350 million. So they wanted to raise 350 million. However, they only managed to raise 230 million. For that reason, they do not believe shareholders will support the right issue. That means another right issue, so the one that we're planning this year, it's less likely that the shareholders will support it. And then, now that the right issue is in dispute and the shareholders, the directors, do not prefer that we go ahead with the right issue, now the option that is available is to go ahead and get the debt financing. However, we do not need this section to answer our question. For that reason, I'm not going to read this part of part 3 of the scenario. We'll then go back and look at our suggested solution and go through it together. So now let us see what we have here. So we're going to start with calculation and ratios that will enable us to then. So what we'll do here, we'll start with the calculation and ratios. Once we've calculated the two, it will be easy for us to critical review. Why am I saying that? It's because when we're doing our calculation and key ratios, we will say, what if we went ahead with the right issue and what if we didn't go ahead with the right issue? So we'll do a comparison of our key ratios without right issue versus with right issue. So that will enable us to then critically evaluate by looking at the numbers and how the ratios have changed if are going to is going to change if we were gonna go ahead and have the right issue. And in that way, we are gonna be able to then critically evaluate the board decision. In that way, you're gonna be saying, these are the good things, or these are the bad things, or these are the good things. However, we're looking at the bad things that will come with the right issue. So we are evaluating here. So evaluating doesn't say only the bad things or say only the good things. You are suggesting the good things and looking also at the bad things. So evaluation is looking at all the angles, not only one angle. So that's the nice thing about evaluation. It opens a big room for you to vent. Then let's look at our calculation. If you look at our calculation, so what we did, we calculated the share price movement. Can you see you have 1 mark just for calculating the share price movement? And this information is coming straight from your scenario. We saw that table with the share price tracker. So all those figures are coming for that share price tracker table. And you can see 2020 to 2021, the share price dropped by 22.2%. It continuously dropped from 21 to 22 and 22 to 23, but with a declining trend. And then when we look at 2024, it declined by 14.6%, which makes sense because the company now is starting to have financial difficulties. They still had problems here, but now the problems are getting worse. So they're approaching the stage of 2021. So then, if you're looking at compound growth, it's 13.13. Alternatively, what you can do, you can calculate the market cap. So the market capitalization, it's shares outstanding multiplied by the share price. So the shares outstanding has been 1 billion from 2020 to 2024, which is why you have 36, which is 36 times 1,000, which you had in the table, but it was billion. So it's basically 36 times 1 billion. This is rounded. And then this is 28 times the billion. So it's also rounded. So we're going to use the rounding numbers. So you're going to take what you have in the table times the share price. What you have in the table times the share price for all of them. And if you see, it looked the same. All the annual changes look the same, mainly because we know that the number of shares outstanding were or was a billion throughout all those years. Never changed. And then we're going to have to try and look at the discount of the right issue price. It is 16.1%. How we got that? We said the share price in the current year, we said the share price of the current year of 20.50 or 20 rand 50 cents. And then we said, what is the right issue price? We were told in the scenario is 17 rand 20 cents. So the discount is 16.1%. That mainly this minus this divided by this, which gives 16.1%. And then we then try to understand what will be the outstanding shares post the right issue. The outstanding shares will be 1.250 billion. How we got that? We said this is the shares that we had prior right issue. We were told for every one share, there will be, for every 4 shares, there will be one right issue. Meaning to say, we're going to have to say 1/4 of this. That is a quarter of 1,000. But remember, this is a rounded number. This is a billion shares. But we are going to use the amount that they provided us in the table, which is rounded. And then it's going to be 1,000 plus 250, which give 1,250. This is billion. So we are told we need to round off the numbers. So we're going to use the numbers they have provided us. You're not going to write billion here because you are asked to round off the numbers. And you have to use what they provided you in the table. SAICA, they know exactly what they provided you in the table. So you're not going to lose mark for bringing in this 1,000 instead of 1,000 billion. Or rather 1 billion, sorry. And for bringing 250 in 200 instead of 250. Instead of 250 million, you're not going to lose anything because you are bringing what they have in the table. So now the post right issue is 1,250, which is 1,000 plus 250. So now what you need now, so now you know the current firm value is 20,500, which is this share price times this. So now the value currently is sitting at 20,500. How do I guess now the cash post right issue? At this amount multiplied by this amount. So it's 17 rand 20 cents, which is the right issue price, multiplied by the 250, which is 1 for every 4 shares. Then you get the new equity as a result of the right issue, and it's 4,300. And you can see this 4,300, it equates to what they need to settle the loans that are due on the 30th of September 2025. So if they are able to, if the shareholders buy the shares or the prospective investors buy the shares, then it is nice, because what does that mean? It means that they are able to raise the entire amount they need to settle the outstanding loans that are due. So the total equity value post right issue will then be 24,800. Now what we need to calculate is the share price post right issue. Share price post right issue, it will simply be 24,800, which is this, the value, divided by the price. Divided by the shares. So it's this amount divided by this. So basically, equity value post right issue the shares post right issue. Now you can see the share price will drop post right issue. Why are we saying it will drop? It's because it currently 20.5. After right issue, it's then sitting at 19.85. That signifies that the share price will drop. Then what is the value per right issue? It is the right issue price minus the share price post right issue, which give 2.64. So just by using the information that has been presented to you in this scenario, you got, look how many marks you would have gotten. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. This, it doesn't even have to be correct. You just get mark for bringing the idea of this calculation. So what is the problem that you see here? We see that this is now below the board target share price of 20 to 36. Already, we can see that there is a problem. Now let us move to the ratios. I've stated that the ratios that we need to look at are the gearing ratios or your liquidity ratios. So the ratio that we're going to be looking at, it's the interest-bearing debt over asset ratio. So interest-bearing debts are all the liabilities that has interest. It's like your long-term and your short-term interest-bearing debt. So why are we calculating this? Because we want to see if we have right issue, that means we're getting 4.3. Or if we don't have right issue, what is the ratio that we have? What is the interest-bearing debt over asset ratio? Now, if we look in the interest-bearing debt, it will be the liability that is provided on the scenario. Let me just remind you the amount. I'm just going to bring in our appendix. So in this appendix, we were provided with the profit or loss of the financial statement. So all those amounts that you see here are the amounts that we're going to use for the ratios. So if you see, these are all our amounts. I want you to keep this amount in mind or just put this next to you as we go through the suggested solution. This was the amount for P&L, and if you go down, these are the amounts for the financial position. If you look at the amount for current year, because you want to make a right issue in the current year, you can see the interest-bearing loans at 10.625, and then this other part of non-current liability, we're going to consider both of them because they are both interest-bearing. We know the lease liability is interest-bearing, and we know these loans, it already stated it's interest-bearing. What mistake you would have done here? You would have missed maybe the lease liability amount. The lease liability has the interest, so it should have been considered. And then if you're looking at the trade and other payables, you know that trade and other payables is within 12 months. So it doesn't attract, in most cases, it doesn't attract interest. Similar with deferred revenue, since its current liability is less than 12 months, it also doesn't attract the interest. The provision, same, and then current tax liability, same. So now when you see this amount, this is exactly the amount you're going to use. So you need to just keep this amount in mind as we go through the ratios, because everything will be coming from this amount. I'm then going to take out, and then we go back to the ratios. So if we're looking at interest-bearing debt, it's that long-term liability that we have of 11,371. That is made up of lease liability and interest-bearing loan. Plus, on your current liability, you have interest-bearing loan, which is current. That gives us 121,997. So what will happen if we were to do a right issue? A right issue will reduce this amount by 4.3. Why will it reduce by 4.3? Because we will receive cash of 4.3 that we will use to reduce the liability that is due. Right? So it makes sense. That is why, including the right issue, then the liability reduces because we are going to settle the liability. And we know we need this right issue as a result of wanting to settle the liability. Doesn't make sense. Then the total asset, the right issue will have no effect on the total asset. So we will bring in the total asset as is it, which is the total of non-current asset plus current asset. So there will be no difference when there is a right issue or there is no right issue. And if we're looking at interest-bearing debt over asset ratio, we see that there is an improvement of 3% as a result of right issue. It's still not a lot, but there is an improvement, which shows that having these right issues will assist the company in its gearing by 3%, which is kind of great. All right. So now, in your negotiations, in your critical review of this right issue, you have to stay to Guti. By having the right issue, it will improve our debt ratio. Now let us look at the other ratio, which is the total liability over asset ratio. So what's the difference between the two? The first one only looks at interest-bearing debt, but this one looks at the total. So if you're looking at this one, we're going to look at the total liability, which will be both current liability as well as non-current liability, without excluding any items that are not interest-bearing. Then we're going to have 139,166. And then when we're looking at the post-right issue, we have to minus 4.3, because the reason we have to minus 4.3 is because we're going to get a cash advance from this right issue. Then it will reduce the liability because we need this amount to settle the liability that are due on the 30th of September. And if you're looking at the ratio, it also improved by 3%. It improved because we are reducing the debt. So this gearing ratio, they're supposed to show improvement. Just by calculating using the information that you have been provided in the scenario, you already have your own 5 marks. And 5 marks can make a lot of difference in determining whether you pass or you don't pass. Then the other ratio that I can calculate is your interest cover ratio. How do you calculate the interest cover ratio? We're going to have to say we exclude interest income and expense. They are not from operation. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the profit, we're going to plus the expense and minus the income. Then these are the amounts that we have for both when there is a right issue or not. Now, for interest expense, there is going to be different. Why? Because now, if we have this right issue, that means we're going to be reducing the interest of 4.3 on the 4.3 billion, which we will be paying it back. Think of you paying off your loan. Let's say you decide that today you want to pay off the loan for your car, and your car is 200,000. Every month you're paying interest on the 200,000. But after you've paid your car and you paid off that 200,000, that simply means now you are at the position whereby you do not need to pay the interest. So it's the same case here. Because they would have paid the 4.3, then that means there will be more money saved on this amount of 4.3, and that is 10.5%, which is the amount of interest we have been given in the scenario. And then if you look then it will be different. We're going to have less interest for when there is a right issue as compared to when there isn't. Then what is happening with the interest cover? It also improving from 102 to 106, which is great. The other one we can calculate is debt to equity ratio. If you're looking at the debt to equity ratio, the equity will stay the same, but the debt will differ. We already have the amounts for the debt. What we see here, we see improvement as well. Right. And if you're looking at the earning, what will happen in the earning? The earning we have been given that is minus 98 on the P&L statement currently without right issue. However, with the right issue, our earnings will improve. While the earning will improve because we would have saved the post-tax interest, because now we've paid back the amount of 4.3 billion. Then the earnings per share will also improve. So you can see all this information is coming right from the scenario, which shows that passing this exam is easy as long as you understand what is in the scenario. Read the scenario as if you're reading the WhatsApp from your boyfriend or from your girlfriend, where you're trying to understand every line your girlfriend or your boyfriend is saying something. So I want you to leave the scenario on the date of the exam so that it's going to be very easy for you to recall the information as you respond. So now we are done with part where we're making calculations and we know what has happened. All the ratios improved as a result of the right issue. We've seen that the share price will decline below the target as a result of right issue. Now let us go and review or evaluate using the memorandum. So evaluating the decision of the directors to not go ahead or to not suggest that the right issue is performed. So what is going to happen? You're going to have to write a memorandum. This is the memorandum structure. So you say where it's going to, where it's coming from, you state the date, and then the subject. So now if you're looking at the introduction, it says, I would agree that the issuing right would be I would agree that issuing the right would be a good initiative to recapitalize the company as it heavily geared. So now in the introduction, you're going to be saying, Wuti, this right issue, you believe it is a good initiative because it will reduce the debt of the company and even the ratios will improve. And we've seen that when we're calculating ratios, that all our ratios have improved as a result of the right issue. Which is why now you have to state the obvious. You're saying you like this initiative. One, it will reduce the debt that we have without us spending anything except issuing more shares. So it is a good initiative. But it's being a good initiative, there are wrong things that comes with it. So let us look at the effect on the share price and expected return. Not having the right issue and further increasing leverage will result in shareholders requiring a higher return, therefore increasing the cost of equity. The right issue would include the company share price would reduce the company share price to below the board targeted level of between 20 and 35 for the company's share price. So we've seen that post-right issue, the share price went to 19.20. That is now below the target that we saw in the scenario. Can you see how are you using the information from the scenario and that you've calculated to evaluate? So we are using our calculation on top and then corroborating with information that was provided in the scenario. We were told that the board target for the share price is in the range of 20 to 35. However, the market sentiment to the right issue may increase the share price if investors believe that the right issue is warranted. The investors might interpret it as a sign that the company is struggling and they can't secure funding through other means like debt. So now remember, we have different shareholders, we have different investors. So there will be investors that feels like having this right issue will put the company in a better position because they will have less debt. But other shareholders will say, no, this is a signal effect. Why aren't they borrowing debt? That means they can't borrow the debt. So now this right issue will split our shareholders' opinion and belief of why this right issue is done. Do you see how do you write the positive and negative? You then collaborate. What are you saying? You can't just say this will be signal effect. You're going to have to say why. You can't say this will mean the company will do well. You have to say the shareholders will have the sentiment with regard to this right issues, while others will look at it as a signal effect. The right issue would give shareholders the opportunity to sell the right, which means allow the company to gain a new type of investor who is willing to take more risk. You know, when you start on the new investment, your appetite of risk will normally be higher compared to someone that has been in the business and has seen the wrong things that are happening or the performance of the company. So now what we are saying here, we're saying it is good idea that we go and write issue and the shares of the company are purchased by the new investors who will have a better risk appetite, who will be willing to take more risk for the company because they will be just joining. Think of anyone, even you, if you're starting at work, your appetite is always high. But the employees that have been there for years, their appetite is not like yours because they've been there. Probably they're tired. So the same with the investors. If the investors are just coming to the company, they'll be willing to take any risk. However, the old one, they'll be like, we've put so much money already, but there's no return. So can you see how nice it is to put your argument? And if you're looking at 2.5, delaying the right issue may continue to have a negative impact on the company share price as the market is clearly not encouraged by the increasing debt. This is evidenced by the difference in asset and equity beta. So what are we saying here? We're saying it makes no use for us to delay the right issue. Let's do it now. Because if we don't do it, then we are refinancing. And refinancing means more debt. So let's rather go with the option of saying we are going ahead with this right issue, get the money, settle some of the debt. Key ratios. Now let's look at the key ratios. So the right issue would have a positive effect on the key debt and financial ratios. We have seen that when we're calculating the debt ratio, debt to equity ratio, the interest cover, they all improved. Even the earning ratios, they improved because now there is going to be lower debts because we'll settle 4.3 billion debts that is due during the year. We've seen the improvement of 3% on the solvency ratios. Still, they're above the target debt to equity ratio. Yes, there's an improvement, but they're still above. We might need to raise more equity so that we're going to get closer to our target. So you need to argue that equity. Yes, there's been an improvement, but the improvement has not put us closer to the target. So what might happen now? We might need more right issue. And then we see the interest cover, it had improved slightly. In addition, we are reducing the interest cost. We saw when we're making calculation above that the interest cost will improve, because now if you circle that, there will be no interest that you need to pay. So not having the right issue now will continue to negatively affect the company's ability to raise the debt and increase the cost of debt. And that will erode the company profit. How we know that? Because we saw if we have right issue, the profit improved. It moved from minus 98 to positive 239. So we better go with the right issue, because now we're not going to be eroding the profit. And moreover, we're not going to be paying a lot of interest, and we might be able to raise more debt after we've paid off 4.3 billion. That is due in September. And we need to consider the fact that if we issue more shares, dividends is not compulsory, but we cannot delay the interest. We all know this. It's even in your CTA years, you will argue and say, it is better I go with the issuing of shares because I do not have to pay the dividend. It is not compulsory. But when it's come to the loan, you have to pay interest as stipulated in the contract. When investors, they go and buy shares, they know that it is not guaranteed that they're going to get back. They're going to get the dividends. They know the risk they are taking. But when the lenders are giving you money, they want their money back. You see, you argue, you preach your point in front, you communicate the things that you know. So you just need the basic thing to write down. Don't say you're waiting to put in the advanced things, just the basic. If you see, yeah, this is the basic that even during your degree years, you will be told by the lectures that these are the good things about the the shares, and these are the bad things about the loans. A non-right issue would make it harder for the company to pay dividends, as it may struggle in future to meet solvency ratio as required by the Companies Act. This may further discourage potential investors. Then let's look at the general. If you're looking at the general, you're also talking about the calculations that you've already calculated above. We're saying the 16.1% discount to the share price prior to the right issue will be enticing current shareholders to take up the right issue. We saw that the share price is sitting at 20.50, but then the right issue is sitting at 17 rand 20. That means it's discounted by 16.1. Shareholders will be like, let's go ahead because the share price, it looks nice. We're going to buy the shares as a price lower than the current price. So there is something that will say they want to go ahead and buy. However, shareholders' concern about the company's constant declining share price and negative growth over time may increase the chances of shareholders not taking up the right issue. Even though there's a discount, these shareholders might sit back with their spouse and look at the company's performance. And maybe the wife and husband of that investor, maybe who's a big investor, might say, no, darling, don't go ahead. This company is not doing well. Look, it shows a negative growth. This shows a negative growth. Can you see? Think of your day to day life. How do you think of things? And the way you think in your day to day, you need to bring it to your exam. This is a professional exam. It simulates your day to day life. Can you see? And then let's move to 4.3. Then 4.3, the question is that is the right issue not fully generated, will the remaining fund needed to obtain via one or more loans? So we have been told that in 2028, they were not able to get the full 350 million. They got 230 million. So now there is a potential that what happened in 2028 might happen now. Now the question is, if it does happen, what we will do? Are we going to try to get more loans? What's going to happen? What will we do in order to pay back the 4.3? Then in 4.4, the company has not had a successful history with the right issue. And then that's the information we were told of, trying to finance 350, but they only managed to get to 30. And then if we don't go with the right issue, the new loan that we'll get, it's 19%. So are we willing to go ahead and have a loan of 19%? So this, you remember when you were reading the scenario, it's coming from the Finance Ltd. Finance Ltd said if they do refinance us, they will finance us at 19%. So if we decide not to go with the right issue, then that means we are willing to go ahead and pay this 19%. Then, because the company want to move to eco-friendly environments, some shareholders will be interested to buy those shares because they believe moving to the strategy might boost the profile of the company and result to future profitability. Therefore, they'll say, no, let us buy those shares, because maybe buying those shares is not a bad idea as we look at the better future for the company. Then 4.7, a right issue will give existing investors the opportunity to be part of the company's new eco-friendly strategy, which, if successfully, would increase investors' value in the company. Having the right issue may encourage all shareholders to take up their rights, as they may not want to lose their current shareholding within the company. A right issue may be a cheaper way to raise additional finances given the company's low cash flow, as the company will be able to save underwriting fees. So where is this underwriting fees coming from? Is coming from the fact that if we need more shares, so they will save on underwriting fees. So this takes us to the end of this question. What I want you to do, I want you to go and subscribe on my YouTube channel. It's called Economics 99. I will continuously post all the solutions. Also on TikTok, it's called Economics 199. I will also post all the solutions for question 2. All the suggested solution will do together the same way that we did this. Thank you so much for getting to this point. Can you please subscribe to my channel? That will encourage me to do all the solutions for even ITC past papers. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.